My main thing is things that we can share as a society in a sort of open space without security. I mean, I use the analogy of if you're a member of any sort of private club, not necessarily mean an upper end club, but any kind of space where you can leave things lying around without fear, and you can feel a sort of sense of trust, or you can go about your business without any kind of fear of crime or stuff like that. I mean that is, I mean, one of my main goals, hopes, is to live in a sort of more high trust society where there doesn't need to be sort of constant security. I mean, I don't want to sound too pessimistic about it. Crime in Britain is not high, really. I mean, we do live in a surveillance state, which is the main reason, but we don't live in a hugely disordered state. But I mean, I wrote that piece in particular. It was after the Manchester bombing, and the result of that was this completely idiotic law stating that anyone who wants to set up any kind of events of 100 people or something has to go through all these security checks. And as people said at the time, this will mainly affect kind of little church gatherings and smaller clubs, and the kind of civil society where which should be encouraged and kind of very necessary. And this was brought about because politicians, this is like their instinctive response to dealing with the Manchester bombing, which was completely preventable had they actually screened who was coming into the country. The Manchester bomber came from a family with quite extreme anti-Western views. It wasn't stopped then. He was a drug dealer in the city, and the police knew he was a drug dealer, and they weren't able to stop him or deport him. And even as he was about to bomb the place, one of the security guards said afterwards, I felt uneasy. I thought there was something wrong there, but I felt like I couldn't say anything because I would be accused of racism and my life would be ruined. And he was probably completely correct to do that. And so the response to this kind of breakdown of trust is that, if you go to a theatre in the West End now, all your bags have to be searched. And it's like, that's such an unnecessarily penalty it's a small thing, but it's a bad thing to have these kind of constant penalties in your life because the people who are supposed to be guarding you aren't doing their jobs properly. And since that law was passed, a number of organizations and clubs have complained and said, we haven't been able to run our events because of this law. It just seems like completely needlessly making our lives worse because we can't deal with the actual problem. I mean, this was slightly side issue, but this inability of lawmakers to kind of face a problem up front to me seems kind of quite a common thing. After the recent acid attack, we saw MPs saying, linking this to microaggressions. It seems like this is not to do with microaggressions. This is the fact that someone who was convicted of sex crimes was given asylum, and that's just like at least deal with the actual problem. I mean, I do feel also this tragic case, this teenager is murdered, and a lot of people said, "Oh, we need to tackle down the dark web and social media." And part of me, this is like not very right-wing me, but I think that's probably not really the case, is it? I mean, the dark web, I just don't think that's relevant. In some cases, this is just politicians dealing with an issue they don't want to deal with, and in some cases, these are just kind of tragedies that just happen in all societies. And there's a kind of sense that we need to sort of be talking about something. But yeah, to go back to your point about no things, yeah, if you don't have competent authorities who can deal with that external danger like that, then you end up just sort of needlessly punishing society. I mean, I think that's a good example. The best example is stuff like outdoor swimming pools, Lidos. There's there was one in Portsmouth about 5 years ago that closed down because they couldn't deal with the constant fighting between people. When it comes to summer, people go to Lido and they fight, just like, okay, so no one gets the swimming pool. Well, it should be quite easy it should be quite possible. It's like, why don't we just punish those people and just make it impossible for them to go to the swimming pool, and they can be isolated rather than everyone losing their access to.
Yeah, there's a creeping normalcy, isn't there, to things diminishing over time because it's creeping. We don't really notice it, and then we just think it's normal. And I suppose there's examples abound of this, and you, I think a good reference point is something that you've written about, and I had to bring this up at a friend's dinner party a few weeks ago, when I was trying to make the point. I was talking about nice things in the UK that we used to have them, because people were like, "Oh, who's coming on your podcast talking about you?" So we used to have them, and we don't really have them so much anymore. And they immediately jumped on it as to, physical things, and because of our colonial past, if we had nice things, we just took them from places. So no, what I'm trying to get to is, regardless of the ins and outs of that, is there's a cultural and social aspect to this too. And the reference point I'm on about is you wrote about the Singaporean Premier, Lee Kuan Yew, who came over to the United Kingdom, was in London just after the Second World War. He stepped out of a tube station and saw an unattended newspaper stand with an honesty box in the middle of central London. And he took a deep breath and said, "And this is what I call a civilized people," or something to that effect. And when I brought that up around the table, everyone was like, "What? That existed?" And that was supposedly in a regressive time when we were just, morally backward people. And this is, and that's where we come from, right? The creeping normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, it's only, that's, I mean, yeah, that's, and I thought about that because I have a friend in Singapore and he just posts pictures, partly to wind me up, I think, laying his bike unlocked on the main roads overnight, and it just doesn't get stolen. And that was completely normal. I mean, people would regularly, if you look at those, the Pathé news reels, which are so sort of subversive now, showing life in Britain in the 40s and 50s, and the thing you always see is, oh, someone goes to the shop and they just leave their bike outside, it doesn't get stolen. That is completely possible. But, I've had like 6 bikes stolen, and, if I go out and leave a bike for the night, I literally have 3 locks, which looks demented, but my bike will get stolen if it has anything less. I just want, all I'm trying to signal is like, it's a hassle to steal my bike. Can you go and steal someone else's instead? And that's a classic example, because people who steal bikes, they've got a 1% chance of getting caught. And if they're repeatedly caught, they might go to jail. I mean, I once wrote something, I said that you don't ever go to jail, but I found like 3 cases of people eventually going to jail for repeated bike theft. But it's just not possible. And, Lee Kuan Yew, what he's created in Singapore. I mean, I've been reading this book recently. Fascinating. But he, he is kind of, I suppose these examples of where a sort of the values of an empire have continued in another place, while in the kind of heartland of the empire, they are, completely impossible. I mean, obviously you wouldn't have an honesty box in central London. I mean, the last time I saw one was in rural Dorset, in a village where the median age was about 75. And I even mentioned it to the people. I said, "That's interesting." I said, "Oh, well, yeah, well, it was broken into and stolen from like 3 months ago, but, we're trying our best." So it's like, even there, you can't. But the idea of having a Piccadilly Circus is obviously absurd and insane.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think it's possible to recreate these things. You just have to, I mean, I suppose it's a matter of will in some ways.
Yeah.
People live with the inconvenience than kind of contemplate the awful possibilities of actually putting people in jail. So yeah, everyone just has to suffer, and your swimming pool has to be closed down. But